Good day, ma'am. Good day, everyone. We are the presenter of the topic 3 entitled Philippine Traditional Crafts in the Discipline-Based Art Education and New Prospect. And I am Orly B. Liberal, reporting the first part together with Ma'am Annalyn C. Swanke and Ma'am Lini P. Paklibar. To start with, we have the summary of the topic. So this paper looks into the possibility of studying Philippine traditional crafts using an art education framework called Discipline-Based Art Education, or the DBAE. The prospect is born of a desire not only to offer an alternative to existing art education, but more importantly, to give traditional crafts attention and recognition within a formal classroom setting. The discussion will first deal with the term craft or crafts and its connotations, followed by the position of crafts in the Philippine art schools and how craft studies is handled by the Philippines' Asian neighbors. This will be followed by the description of DBAE and finally a list of suggestions on how crafts can be incorporated into formal secondary education. Next, we have the introduction of the topic. So the term craft originally came from the Old English word craft, which means power, strength, or might. Later on, it came to mean skill or art and was associated with an idea of mental power according to Harper in 2001. Eventually, it was linked to things made by hand according to Oxford Dictionaries in 2009. Other connotations of the word are decorative arts or the handmade luxury goods for use and display inside buildings or on the human body. So trade and folkways and long traditions of pre-industrial production of handmade objects. According to the UNESCO definition, UNESCO defines crafts as follows: those produced by artisans either completely by hand or with the help of hand tools or even mechanical means, as long as the direct manual contribution of the artisan remains the most substantial component of the finished products. These are produced without restriction in the terms of quantity and using raw materials from sustainable resources. The special nature of artisanal products derives from their distinctive features, which can be utilitarian, aesthetic, artistic, creative, culturally attached, decorative, functional, traditional, religiously and socially symbolic, and significant. Such definitions consolidates the connotations and implications of the term crafts. However, this proposal refers to the traditional crafts or what Metcalf relates to as folkways. Even so, the author is also keen to note the social dimension of every piece of traditional craft. It considers the dignity of human labor and the cultural and social milieu to which craftsman belongs. Here are some famous handicraft in the Philippines by region. So we have the pots and jars from the Ilocos region, the woven fabrics from the region of Mindanao, wood carving from the Cordillera and Southern Luzon, and jewelry from Central and Southern Luzon and Mindanao regions. Also, we have metal craft from Southern and Luzon and Mindanao regions and woven crafts from Visayas regions. So we have now the discussion. So crafts on the margin. The history of crafts education in the Philippines parallels the rise and fall of an empire. In Spanish colonial Philippines, convents were turned into schools and workshops of carpentry, ironworks, drawing, painting of images, cutting and sewing of altar cloths, designing and sewing of altar pieces, textile weaving, and other forms of practical arts, according to Flores in 1998. Such schools, serving as handmaidens of missionary work, came to an end when the Academia de las Bellas Artes opened in 1785. Crafts education in the Philippines reached its peak during the American period when the educational system was revised and expanded to include industrial work and crafts for livelihood, like woodwork, clay modeling, basket and mat weaving, and embroidery and lace making. Over the decades, crafts subjects offered under the American public school system would be jettisoned or omitted to save for woodwork and clay modeling, which still figure in the present curricula of the public elementary school system. What have come to take the place of crafts are painting, sculpture, architecture, photography, printmaking, dance, theater, and cinema, according to Department of Education in 1998. Such a trend continues in the tertiary level. In three major Philippine universities conferring fine arts degrees, common areas of specialization include painting, sculpture, advertising arts, and industrial design. Although crafts may be part of the curricula, no undergraduate or graduate degrees are offered in the area of crafts. Public exhibitions of crafts have not been common in the local art scene. Galleries are wont to present painting and sculptural works, which are seen as the sole possessor of commercial and aesthetic value. Even the locally conferred National Artists Award sees art as distinct from craft and, therefore, is open only to artists who are or were practitioners of Western-oriented art. To help remedy this, the National Commission for Culture and Arts launched the Gawad Manilikha ng Bayan, or literally National Creator Awards, to honor traditional artisans and culture bearers. In 2002, the exhibition Crafting Economies opened at the Cultural Center of the Philippines, curated by Patrick Flores, aimed to confront the marginalization of craft in the contemporary art world, and he clarifies that to reconsider craft is not to invest it with artness, or to do so would be to fall into the art of trap once again, but to reoperationalize its aesthetic potential. By the same token, to renounce art is not to reduce it to craft, but to redeploy the mode of its making in society and history. It is this society and history that renders art craft material to our lives, that allows it to circulate in an economy of exchange and reciprocation. Seen this way, crafts become demarginalized and could rightly find a place in mainstream art society and education in the Philippines. Its aesthetic qualities could be recognized, as well as their production within a particular social and historical environment, which renders both craft and art significant to ordinary life. Now we have craft studies in Asian education systems. Curiously, the underestimation of crafts does not have all the earmarks of being an all-inclusive wonder. In a few districts of East and Southeast Asia, crafts foundations and universities are very much gone too. Crafts graduates have a wide exhibit of career opportunities. They may seek an independent craft practice, work in a group as a studio artist, work in an organization or industry, land a post in the education sector, work in a craft distribution firm, or form part of a craft research organization or agency, such as a museum or a restoration company. Educator John notes that a majority of craft practitioners, which he calls craft artists, are highly educated. They create and exhibit works in shows at par with international standards. In Korea, the high school curriculum prepared by the Korea Institute of Curriculum and Evaluation aims to empower students to attain knowledge and skills in diverse fields so that they will be able to carve out a career in accordance with their aptitudes and interests, and to encourage students to work to develop our traditions and culture in a way appropriate for the global setting. There are also specialized high schools devoted to the arts, which most likely include crafts. Unfortunately, no detailed information regarding specialized Korean high schools could be accessed by this author. Reference to it was simply made in a website of the Office of the Prime Minister of Korea in 2006. In Japan's integration of crafts into university education varies little from that of Korea. Crafts courses are offered in a 4-year course with specializations in the field of arts and crafts. Unlike Korean crafts programs, Japan do not offer woodworking. The most common craft specialization is in ceramics. Craft specialization programs are offered in the undergraduate, MA, and PhD levels. Students are expected to blend traditional techniques with contemporary aesthetics with a sense of functional beauty, which the Dushanbe University of Art Design termed as beautility or beauty of utility, or which the Tohoku University of Art and Design expressed as the unity of functionality and beauty. In Southeast Asia, crafts education has also established itself in formal learning centers. Keris making is offered as a course in the Fine Arts Department of the Indonesia College of the Arts in Surakarta. The keris of Malaysia or kiris is a traditional straight or curvy-bladed dagger which is an important component of ceremonial dress in Malay culture. The wavy design of the narrow blade creates a large and severe wound from which victims seldom recover. In Malaysia, the state-run Malaysian Handicraft Development Corporation operates the National Craft Institute, which provides academic and skills training in various fields of Malaysian crafts such as batik, weaving, ceramic, woodcraft, bamboo, and metal-based craft. Diploma programs run for a total of 3 years, while the certificate programs are completed in 2. A 2004 report on the state of Malaysian crafts noted a total of 436 institute students of the Malaysian Handicraft Development Corporation in 2004. Thailand incorporates craft studies in its secondary education curriculum, which consists of the academic stream and vocational stream. Crafts education occurs alongside Thai and foreign languages, science, mathematics, social studies, physical education, and art. Students are prepared for university education and graduate with a certificate of secondary education, while vocational stream students receive a certificate of vocational education upon graduation and are prepared for employment and further studies. Under the vocational stream program, students specialize in one of the 5 major fields, including agriculture, home economics, business studies involves marketing, travel and tourism, public relations, arts and crafts, and technology, which involves mechanical, civil, electronic, and industrial, according to Sidgwick in 2005. The foregoing has listed how crafts are incorporated into formal education systems of some East and Southeast Asian countries. The accommodation of crafts courses within formal education in the Philippines, therefore, has precedent and should not therefore be dismissed. Not unlike her neighbors, the Philippines has a long history of craft production that goes back to pre-Hispanic times. It is about time that crafts education is elevated to a new level of recording at the very least in the secondary school system.
Good day, everyone. I am Annalyn C. Swanky, second reporter from Group 3. I am tasked to report discipline-based art education as a framework for studying crafts. This discussion describes BDAE means discipline-based art education and explores how various Philippine crafts could serve as course content. This section draws from 2 authors, Robinson Castellano Soria, a Filipino, and Stephen Dobb, an American. Soria's dissertation, entitled Art Education and Student Artistic Development Across 3 Cultures, uses the BDAE framework to assess student artistic achievement in the Philippines, Taiwan, and the United States. His recommendations include adopting the DBAE approach in art classrooms to enhance public school art education and to upgrade the quality of life of the general public. This present proposal carries Soria's recommendation further by integrating traditional crafts objects into a DBAE-based curriculum. On the other hand, Stephen Mark Dobbs is the author of Learning in and Through Art, which comprehensively describes the DBAE method of teaching art. His book serves as a major source in this section's discussion. What is DBAE? According to Robinson Soria, in his study of Philippine art education, DBAE is an contemporary approach to art education that presents a broad view of art and emphasizes art in the general education of all students from kindergarten until high school. This approach integrates content from four art disciplines, namely aesthetics, art criticism, art history, and art production, through a focus on works of art. Stephen Dobbs, author of Learning in and Through Art, describes DBAE as designed to provide exposures to, experience with, and acquisition of content from several disciplines of knowledge, but especially from four foundational disciplines in art: art making, art criticism, art history, and aesthetics. By teaching art using these foundational Philippine traditional crafts in discipline-based art education, learning is centered on the creation, understanding, and appreciation of art, artists, artistic processes, and the role and function of art in cultures and society. Before DBAE, art classes had been centered on creative self-expression. This approach considers the learner innately creative and expressive who needs nurturing rather than instruction. As such, teachers only need to provide motivation, encouragement, support, and opportunity. They are in no way to impose adult concepts or images. They must take caution against inhibiting the learner's self-expressions. Indeed, a learner's underdevelopment is attributed precisely to adult intervention. Furthermore, under this educational philosophy, works of art are not viewed as material for study. They are perceived to negatively affect the learner's self-expression and creative development. As for evaluation, what is paramount is the learner's growth and process of art making. On the other hand, DBAE calls on the balanced art curriculum that stresses content from four art disciplines. It is a creation against an approach that saw art primarily as creative self-expression. In the 1960s, the creative self-expression school was at its peak in the art curricula. However, in a number of conferences in the United States, art educators began questioning the dominant pedagogical philosophy. Later on, theorists, scholars, researchers proposed alternatives. And by the middle of the 1980s, the BAE had emerged as a solid counterpoint to art education. So what are the characteristics of DBAE or discipline-based art education? So to understand DBAE in finer detail, we turn to Stephen Dobbs' work, Learning in and Through Art, in which he enumerates the characteristics of DBAE. First, students are engaged in the rigorous study of art derived from the four art disciplines. Second, a long-range program planning capacity for art is in place, given impetus by the adoption by the local school, district, university, and art museum of a policy statement and goals for students' learning that include comprehensive art education. Then, a written art curriculum framework exists or is in the process of being developed, in which learning is sequenced within and between grades to reflect the developmental and age-appropriate factors. Written sequential lesson units and learning experiences engage students in balanced attention and study derived from the content of the four foundational art disciplines: art making, also known as studio art or art production; art history, art criticism, and aesthetic, also known as philosophy of art is taught by certified teachers who are given opportunities for professional development to build their knowledge, skills, and understanding of DBAE. Art specialists and classroom or other subjects teachers collaborate in planning and teaching. Students have access to school-sponsored and community-based art experiences and resources, such as frequent visits to art museums or to other public art settings. Assessment of student learning is conducted regularly, with the results reported to stakeholders, including students, teachers, and administrators, policymakers, and parents. Art may be integrated into the general curriculum through application of the distinctive lenses acquired through study of the four art disciplines to content in other subject areas. Art may be integrated into other subject areas and vice versa. Art education is for all students, not for those who demonstrate talent in making art. Students with special needs are also identified and provided with art, Philippine traditional craft and discipline-based art education. BDAE is for all students, not just for those who are identified as gifted and talented, and therefore favored with art instructions. The art program is appropriately coordinated, administered, and supported at different levels by the faculty leader and principal within the school, and by the curriculum supervisor within the school district. The superintendent may assume responsibility for advocating and explaining the program to the school board, which in turn can support the program with parents and the community. And technology is used to broaden art teaching and learning options. Teachers and students have access to technology and use it to enhance production, creation, or design of works of art, to communicate about art, and to access and manage information about. A comprehensive program needs the cooperation of not just a few teachers, but also the entire body of educators in a given school or district. At this point, there may be a reservations about its application to the local Philippine setting, what with a dearth of resources, physical and material, including professionals training for DBAE educators. This shall be discussed in due course. In the meantime, it is important to dwell on the four foundational art disciplines, the heart of DBAE, and how they can be applied to the study of crafts in a Philippine context. There are four art disciplines and the study of crafts. The four foundational art disciplines of the DBAE are art making, art criticism, art history, and aesthetics. Art making is a process of responding to observations, ideas, feelings, and other experiences by creating work of art through the skillful, thoughtful, and imaginative application of tools and techniques to various media. Through art making, students can explore and study a host of concerns and issues. By studying and encountering an array of media and tools, students may ask about the sources of the artist's visual idea and how these take form in an art object. Students can also learn traditions of craftsmanship, including potentialities of materials, could give rise to insights on artists, preference for materials to be used, the step involved in working with certain media, the influence of the environment and work habits on a piece of work. Students learn to express thoughts, values, and feelings visually through methods developed by artists, and they can come up with a variation of somebody's work or a completely new take. Art making also teaches students about visual problem solving, or how artists resolve the tension between opportunities and limitations at hand. Lastly, it also brings students to the motivations and attitudes of artists, as well as their contributions to society, and how personal, social, and cultural backgrounds shape. As for actual craft making, this segment of the DBAE creates an opportunity for the students to engage in actual craft making. For instance, Ilocano pottery. An actual pottery sample may first be examined in class in terms of texture, material, and avenues. Students will then try their hand at actual pottery making. They learn the steps and discover the skills to produce a clay vessel. In the course of the activity, they can discover the techniques, for instance, the right pressure to apply, the moderation needed to handle with clay, and other technical details. Identify the tools used to create designs and fashion the clay into their desired form. They may realize, for instance, that a kitchen ladle could be a good paddling tool, or that a fork could be used to impress designs on the clay surface. This way, students learn the traditional way of making Ilocano pottery, which they may see from an invited artisan or even from a video documentary. Also, innovation and improvisations are introduced and even encouraged. Explore potentialities of the material and tools and gain insight into what makes one molding material better than another. For instance, students can grasp how different types of commercial clay behave compared to clay soil. And in taking up, say, Bulacan paper cutting crops, they can point out why a specific type of scissors works better than another, why a certain kind of paper is more suitable for paper cutting, or what motif is best given the available tools. In the area of visual problem solving, the students can discover how to resolve tensions between opportunities, the means available, and the restraints encountered. Say, in clay molding, what does one do when he or she discovers a weak layer of clay at the bottom of the vessel? Certain issues would press for solutions too. Where is the best place to conduct an open firing, for instance? What time of the day? What precautions should be observed? What kind of skills would be needed to mold a newspaper, which has been soaked in water for days and months? Could this be combined with other molding materials like clay, soil, or commercial clay? How would one resolve its internal supports? In the case of paper cutting, how does one remedy a situation where the paper is accidentally wet? Could a cutout still be executed on it? Issues of workspace will also demand attention. How should the workspace be arranged? Is sitting better than squatting as one shapes the clay? How do work habits affect the production of a craft? Is saving a snack while working compatible with pottery making or with other craft making activities, for that matter? Other issues of interest are themes, subject matter, and the function of a craft. Again, in clay molding, what does one need the clay pot for, and how will its use determine its size, shape, and design? Will it be painted over or glazed? Lastly, students can also read about artisans and appreciate their philosophy, as well as their social contributions, not least of which is to keep some traditions alive. However, a lot of work in these aspects has yet to be done since traditional artisans are not famous and celebrated. All the same, in looking at the artisans themselves, students can appreciate various influences and contributions to an artisan's work, training, experience, and cultural and social backgrounds. They can also develop some good habits and personal qualities for good craftsmanship, like perseverance, patience, self-awareness, and resourcefulness. What is art criticism? Art criticism has to do with describing, interpreting, evaluating, and theorizing about works of art with the end of increasing understanding and appreciation of art and its role in society. The DBAE classroom draws on art criticism to help students carefully observe works of art, comparing and contrasting them while considering the context in which they were produced. A class can discuss the subject and theme of the work, the intentions, interests, or social or political concerns of the artist, the significance of the medium, the opinion of critics about the work, and how it bears on the development of artists, the artwork's function in society, and audience interpretation of, and reaction to the artwork, and the aesthetic experience the artwork provides and how it sustains attention and stimulates active discovery of new things. In incorporating art criticism into craft education, one can take, for instance, the tradition of handloom weaving. Traditional textiles such as those produced in weaving centers in the mountain province, Ifugao or Ilocos Norte, are adorned with motif, both figurative and non-figurative. In art criticism, students can take up these subjects and explore how they relate to the main function of the textile piece within a given cultural environment. The prevalence of the lizard motif in Ifugao textiles or the flowers, mountains, and rivers in ethnic textiles can be points for discussion. So, is the crocodile motif is most tinalak and bilaan fabrics, or the okil or ochre motif in Tausug and Maranao textiles, metalwork and woodwork. These design patterns and motifs may also be studied by comparing the views of anthropologists and the communities that actually use them. Furthermore, art criticism can study the colors of a craft work. Topics of note could be why traditional pottery is stained reddish brown or sometimes left alone with the natural color of the clay soil reveal information well related to the function of its clay piece. Why certain indigenous communities prefer certain colors in their fabrics has much to say about that community's perception of a certain hue. Why do Ilocanos, for instance, use yellow and its related hues a lot, even in the why bamboo poles, which are used as procession arcs in parades, are never painted over is also worth taking up. Despite there being no red horses endemic to the Philippines or anywhere else for that matter. Why do Paiti Taka papier-mâché makers paint their horses bright red? Art criticism can also discuss aesthetic experience. Students can focus on, say, the power of a vegan silver frontal to sustain attention. What with its seemingly simple fern patterns pressed on the metal surface, but which, upon closer inspection, reveals human faces hidden within the fern pattern. Optical illusions figuring in ethnic or Ilocano blankets are capable of mesmerizing the viewer, more so after learning what the motif stands for. Within the art criticism segment of BDAE, students are trained to express their appreciation for crafts in written and verbal discussion. Here, the opportunity for students to go deeper into the understanding of a certain craft work is immense. The functionality of a craft work is seen within the context of its designs, colors, and thank you for listening and God bless. The continuation of this report will be given to you by Ma'am Lini Paklibar.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, classmates. I'm Lenny. Historical imagination can enter the discussion of highlighting the development of the bakya, or Filipino wooden clogs. The bakya used to be carved with rural images on its heel and created with a crusade dahon or pluff. Its variations through time are matters of historical study. The same holds true for native Filipino costumes. The historical of which is linked to different and specific socio-cultural conditions. According to Dobbs, historical inquiry into a work may take a wide range of forms: authentication, iconography, the meaning of the objects and symbols in the work; provenance, or the history of the ownership of the work; the function, the style, the psychology or the personal factors that help relate the artist to his or her time and the work to a particular social and cultural milieu; and connoisseurship, or how the intensive study of the work reveals or help revolve with regards the problems of authorship, ownership, or physical condition. Applying art history to the study of craft, students get an idea of the long tradition of craft making in the country. However, unlike art history, volumes of which have been widely circulated, a consolidated reference for the study of Philippine craft history has yet to be produced. Early historical accounts about the Philippines by chroniclers and travelers, ethnohistorical data, and dictionaries produced during the Spanish colonial period all refer to traditional crafts. Yet, all these have to be compiled and published to the benefit Philippine craft education under the DBAE framework. Is not this belated publication on Philippine craft history another indication of the marginalized position of Philippine traditional crafts? In the study of craft history, other references may be include early samples of craft in museums where developments in craft production can be noted. Both continuity and divergence may be detected by comparing old craft samples with new ones. When integrating art history to crafts education, visit to ethnographical museums where crafts are displayed become necessary. The only problem in that is the Philippines ethnographical museums are not aplenty, and until they are established, craft examples, especially the early specimens, can be exhibited with the cooperation of private collectors. Schools may also begin building their own collections of inexpensive crafts such as hats, mats, cooking utensils, pottery, and the like, which the DBAE inspired. Crafts classes can eventually use as teaching materials. Such a collection may be served as a laboratory for craft history classes, where cataloging methods to establish provenance and documentation as be practiced. Aesthetic is a branch of philosophy that examines the nature, meaning, and value of art and other things from front as aesthetic point of view, according to Dobbs in 1998, 46. The study of aesthetic helps students understand what distinguishes art from the other kinds of phenomena, the issues that such differences gives rise to, and how one may justify judgment about art objects. Concretely, classes can inquire into whether crafts can possess aesthetic qualities, that is, whether crafts can hold qualities that make them art or render them beautiful. Discussion may revolve around the aesthetic qualities of, say, the Abel Eloco, the Pinya-made Barong Tagalog, the bamboo procession arches of Quezon Province, the humble clay Karamba, or the keeping Dick Lokban House on a Pahiyas Festival Day, held in May each year. More advanced classes can look into the aesthetic issues that surrounds these painting and sculptures. As an adjective, aesthetic speaks of a particular kind of experience one can have with my phenomenon. As Dove says, aesthetic encompasses the study of the special qualities of the aesthetic experience and its unique contributions to human life and culture, with the complexities and subtleties of aesthetic experience, which for the purpose of the DBAE focuses on the visual imagery of art objects. In this regard, an experience in attending the manual or the annual Pahiyas Festival, a visit to a traditional artisan workshop, or one hands-on experience in sitting with the backdrop loom in small Efigal village can become a subject for aesthetic discussion in the craft class. Aesthetic inquiry builds on the content of the other three disciplines. According to Dubs in 1998-49, it directs attention to the act of artistic creation, the art of objects itself, its interpretation and appreciation, critical evaluation, and the cultural and social context. Following Dubs, one can ask whether the value of the artwork is external to it. In responding to this, one would refer to artist motives and intentions, the tools used, and constraints faced, the theme or object, the socio-political influence on the artist, the media, and etc. The question of beauty is also part of aesthetic inquiry. Students get to think philosophically about the nature of art and beauty. That is, they explore the reasons why or why not a work is beautiful, drawing from the three other disciplines mentioned above. When applied to crafts education, aesthetic inquiry takes actual crafts pieces as subject on which to base aesthetic judgment. Students explore questions related to its production. For instance, the artisan possible considerations in designing a wooden bulol, ephemerized god, the aesthetic reasons why a particular textile pattern is effectively placed in the one portion of the tapestry and or not in other of the reasons for one preference for a certain craftwork over another. Aesthetic can also look into the value of crafts within a given culture context and the demand on all responsibilities of the artist. If, for instance, a life-size bulul is used by an art collector as a clothes hanger, it is aesthetic value reduced or enhanced? And why or why not? Is this an aesthetic issue? Aesthetic inquiry raises the level of craft appreciation by teaching students how to argue for or against the interpretation and perceptions of crafts. To bring this discipline to a command and accessible level raises not only the position of crafts in Philippine social but also the awareness of the general public. Aside from the benefits that the study of craft offers using the four foundational art disciplines, it may also be noted that through crafts, the students can heighten his or her understanding for the communities that serve as cradles of craft traditions by direct contact with these crafts and the dynamics involved in their production. As such, the learning that the students arrive at is first-hand and not mediated by the secondary source. Moreover, an emphasis on the value of crafts as form of beauty promises to create appreciation for ordinary things, which in the long run ought to develop a sense of integrity and pride in the products no matter how commonplace, simple, or inexpensive. Much later on, this attitude could extend to ordinary manifestation of what is national, giving rise to national pride. Still, the fact that craft education promises to empower the youth who may have no available means to pursue professional courses could not be ignored. Countries like Thailand have long realized the export potential of craft products. There is no reason why the Philippines could not likewise benefit from the export of its craft and boast its gross national product by building up its pool of crafts practitioners. This breed of craftsman may well become craftsman businessman as opposed to craftsman artist, both of which metalsmith and scholar Bruce Metcalf have distinguished Metcalf in 1997. That the DBAE crafts proposal could give rise to such breed is not to be uh, bemoaned per possibility. After all, crafts are admittedly functional to begin with, and yet, as the experience of beholding uh, an abil Iloco fabric or a Pahiyas festival house could prove, and as the previous discussion had shown, craft can be reckoned with aesthetically. The possibility of extending its functionality peer to see compasses its monetary benefit to the craftsman does not waver away from the nature in the present time or a century. Envisioning the DBAE CRAFTS curriculum, having discussed the four fundamental art disciplines and their possible application to the study of crafts, this paper has argued for reconsideration and crafts in formal education, and now is offered proposal for a DBAE-based curriculum for secondary education. This includes the classroom activities, issues, and questions which is of the four disciplines of the DBAE. Okay, we have the DBAE crafts curriculum for the first to fourth year high school uh, levels may take the following form. So we have the form below. The proposal above takes into consideration the current state of public school system resources from the point of view of both the school and the students. As such, pedagogical concern pertains to level of difficulty, expense, and safety. It is noticeable that the material needed for the crafts courses are easily accessible and inexpensive. Crafts classes like mat, weaving, and costume making leave plenty of room for innovation given various materials that can be potentially used. Synthetic materials like plastic or even paper may be employed for the mat weaving classes. Costume making classes, on the other hand, could make us of fabrics from old clothes, blankets, and curtains. Neither are the crafts dependent on expensive equipment or tools. The emphasis is clearly on handmade products, which really on inexpensive material and almost hazard-free tools. The curriculum above covers all 4 years of secondary crafts education and is formulated as a government-defined curriculum for all public schools. The last year crafts education allows some flexibility because it is open to regionalization and is determined by the traditional crafts originating from a particular region. For instance, taka making for the southern Tagalog region, lantern making for the northern Tagalog region, the textile weaving for the Cordillera region, and the pottery and textile for northern Luzon. The Visayas region could adapt leaf art, and Mindanao may adopt indigenous jewelry making, drawing from the uh, Tibuli tradition of personal ornamentation. Using the scheme of regionalization, the crafts curriculum makes for embedded learning when the crafts studied include those native to the particular region, and from which the student ought not to be alienated. With such specialized knowledge required by the curriculum, crafts educators must have a strong background in Philippine art and anthropology. Educators may also come from the ranks of artisans, especially during the first quarter classes. Schools, with the help of the local government units, must also procure appropriate teaching materials. In known crafts producing centers or regions, crafts classes may go more deeply into its inherent crafts practice. As such, weaving production centers may dedicate more time to textile subjects. Thus would ensure the preservation of the region cultural heritage at the institutional level. A DBAE curriculum would rely on a district and even province-wide cooperation. This would include the involvement of local governments, which would provide logical support for the artisans, who in turn would train instructors and visit schools and art classes, since the public schools are wont to deviate from the Department of Education art curriculum and follow an art program suited to resources available to them. The implementation of the craft-centered art education need not to be highly contentious. The crucial elements rest more on the preparation of the instructors, which in this case would have to come from the ranks of Philippine art and Philippine studies graduates. How to lure them into the public school education system will constitute the greatest challenge to this program. Nonetheless, just as the present National Service Training Program is working in the public school all over the country, so perhaps Philippine art students could serve in public schools and help carry out crafts education in the country. For the conclusion of my topic, the foregoing discussion showed the current position of crafts within the Philippine education system and how the Philippines falls short among other Asian countries in adopting the intensive crafts education curriculum. A framework to reintroduce the study of crafts has been proposed in this paper through the discussion of the discipline-based art education. By recommending the DBAE, this paper has suggested not only a new manner of studying crafts but also, more importantly, the feasibility of integrating crafts into formal instruction by using the four art disciplines of art making, art criticism, art history, and art aesthetics. Ultimately, the paper demonstrated that crafts could be considered and taught in classroom using a specific framework. To further extrapolate the feasibility of crafts curriculum, the paper also developed a division of craft topics for a high school crafts curriculum program. The envisioned curriculum may once successfully realize spur the opening of crafts degree courses. The author is aware, however, that several other factors and forces will have to come into play to turn that dream into reality. For the purpose of this paper, at least the author has set forth his vision and broached that possibility. For the notes of my topic, these degree programs are commonly offered in the University of the Philippines College of Fine Arts, the University of Santo Tomas College of Fine Arts and Design, and the Philippine Women's University School of Fine Arts and Design. Number 2. The artisan may be invited through an agency-to-agency arrangement where the municipal government where the artisan resides could be requested to sponsor the travel costs of the craftsperson. Or if the school happens to be in a locality where a craft is practiced, then practicing artisan may be invited to the classroom to demonstrate and teach the students. The artisan could also instruct the teachers who will later on be responsible for demonstrating crafts making in the students. Then, number 3, a silver a frontal is pressed metal that serve as a decorative panel facing the congregation on altars inside Catholic churches. It was a practice introduced during the Spanish period. And the last part is the references that you can see below. Thank you and God bless.